Hello, welcome to Down to Earth with Dee. We are continuing these conversations because many of you have reached out saying we must continue having these conversations with amazing people that I've really enjoyed having every single conversation with. While I've learned, I hope you've learned with me. I hope you're all home and you're safe and you're healthy. I'm giving you all lots of love. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to be in conversation with Ravichandran, who is the founder of Scrap. I met her last year and I was completely blown away by her commitment to climate action and the kind of choices that she's making at an individual level, and as a company is also helping many others make better choices. Divya is a passionate advocate for sustainability and zero waste living. We're going to ask her today what it means to live a life that produces zero waste. It's a very tough choice, but it's one that she makes. I say it's tough because almost everything that we use in our everyday lives is packaged, and I am always very inspired by people who can make these choices. So we're going to learn from her what it means to lead a zero waste life, what it means to conduct zero waste events, and yeah, and I think it's important to have this conversation because we all want to find solutions to beat plastic pollution. We want to find ways to reduce wasteful consumption. We want to find ways to become aware of our consumption patterns. So let me just see if Divya has sent a request. Hi,
Hi there.
how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm so excited that I'm getting to talk to you. I've been meeting after a year,
Yes,
but I've been following all the amazing work you've been doing, and I was very keen that you be a part of the Down to Earth with D conversations because there's so much to learn from you, Divya. I mean, I continue to learn from you just by following you on Instagram, and
wow.
what you do is truly inspiring and so necessary for all of us to learn from you and understand from you what it means to live a more sustainable life. I have to admit that while I've managed to eliminate all use of single use plastic from my life, and we've managed to make our society a zero waste society by
Amazing.
composting our wet waste, there's still a
Fantastic.
lot more to learn, and who better than to learn from you? So let me start, Divya, by asking you. Uh, you were not always somebody who was aware of or mindful of the waste that you were creating.
Right.
There was a switch that happened. There was something that happened to you that made you understand that you needed to change. What was that moment? How did it happen?
Right. So, like you said, my journey to trash wasn't, I mean, it's something that just happened to come about. And it started in 2016 with an unfortunate incident. There was a massive fire that broke out in the largest dumping ground in Mumbai at Deonar. And the fire was so huge, it took almost a week to get it under control. And the blaze that covered the city in toxic fumes was so huge that it could be seen from NASA's satellite images. Part of it that those fumes also came towards my home, and I lived on the 18th floor, and all I could see was thick black clouds outside my window for a few days. And I have respiratory issues, which forced me to stay indoors for that entire week. And while I locked myself indoors, I started reading about where is this like toxic fumes coming from? Why am I wheezing so much? And what do you mean an entire city's trash is on fire? That's when I started reading about the dumping grounds. And I was someone who thought being a responsible citizen was making sure that I don't litter on the streets. But that's all that my knowledge of waste prior to that really was. So once the fire kind of was under control, I went and visited the dumping ground because I couldn't wrap my head around what I'd really read that day. And when I went to the dumping ground, I was shocked to see these huge mounds of trash in front of me, where the city's waste was actually going. And I realized that that's where my trash is also going, and I'm contributing to that. So to see that effect of our trash on the environment, on human health, because there are communities that live around there, was quite a shocking experience. And that's the day when I decided I have to check out of this. Like, I can't have my waste going to this and contributing to this. So that day I came back home, I set up a waste segregation system at home and started diligently learning about waste segregation and started doing that at home. And I made sure that my trash was segregated into my kitchen scraps, so my biodegradable waste, my plastic waste, and my recyclable waste was all kept separately. And then only my reject waste was the third category. So I started doing that. And then I said, now what? Because the housekeeping team would still take it in a mixed manner back then. So I decided if I'm taking matters into my own hands at home, might as well as go all way in. So I brought home a composter and learned how to start composting, and that took care of about 60% of all my ghar ka kachra right there. And I got this beautiful compost that came out from there, which is such a meaningful and life-changing experience for me personally. And then all my sukha kachra, my dry waste, recyclable waste, I would collect this. I found local recyclers who took some of it. And for the rest, I identified dry waste collection centers where I could send this to, where they could actually recycle and make this into new products instead of trashing it somewhere. And by doing that,
before you carry on, I just want to quickly jump in because there'll be lots of people who don't understand many of the things that we've said. Okay,
right.
so we'll simplify it, right?
Great.
First things first. What is a landfill?
So landfill is simply an unscientifically managed space of land where all the trash is picked up, collected, and just dumped out there. There's no scientific processes to it necessarily because we usually have dumping grounds. So all our waste, our mixed waste from home, biodegradable waste, recyclable waste. So that's your banana peels, your glass bottles, metals, sanitary waste, your trash from medical facilities, industrial areas is all just collected and just put in there. That's essentially a dumping ground, or what we call it.
And the reason why the Deona dumping ground had caught fire is because when dry and wet waste mix together, there are certain toxic fumes that emanate from it and can also lead to a fire.
Right.
It's because when the biodegradable material, which is the wet waste, all our kitchen and biodegradable waste mixes with the dry waste, it basically can lead to all kinds of toxic fumes that are generated and can
Absolutely.
lead to a fire.
And sending our, if I can
Sorry.
just add, sending our biodegradable and kitchen waste to the landfills is a nightmare because it starts rotting and generates harmful greenhouse gases like methane, which contribute to a large part of the fire.
Right. And now when we talk about segregating and composting, I want you to explain segregation and what it means to compost.
Right. So
I'm asking all the questions. So
absolutely. So similar to how you don't mix certain materials together, right? Oil and water, we've always thought don't mix together. Similarly, our household waste also has different categories of waste that just shouldn't mix together. One part of it is what we call our gila kachra, which is our wet waste, our kitchen waste, or our biodegradable waste. Very simply, it is your peels, your vegetable peels, your fruit peels, eggshells, bones, tea, coffee grounds, stuff that mostly comes from your kitchen, from the food preparation. All of this goes into the first category.
When I explain wet waste to children, I always say whatever grows from the earth and that can go back to the earth is called wet waste.
Absolutely. And then the second category is our sukha kachra, which is our recyclable waste, or you can call it your kabadi wala's kachra. That's your paper, plastic, metal, glass, even your Tetra packs, etc. all of these can have valuable materials in it that can be given a second life simply by sending it to a local recycler or a dry waste collection center.
Okay, super. So you started out by segregating waste and composting waste at home. And
Yes,
then you took it to the next level, which is this is of course in itself a very responsible choice, one that is considered sustainable living, something that we practice, and I'm very proud that everybody in my society is practicing it as well. And we're actually trying to encourage more and more cooperatives in Mumbai and the country to become to start segregating waste. But
yes,
it's a challenge, that because many people are still not willing to understand and accept that this is something that needs to be done to make a difference.
right,
We have managed to create centers. Like there's one center on Pali Hill that collects all the kitchen waste from the people who are residents of Pali Hill, and that goes to the center and it converts the kitchen waste into power, energy, and it
yes.
electrifies the street lights in that area. So there are many wonderful ways in which you can treat your kitchen waste. One is, of course, composting and using the khat or the manure that the compost creates for plants and greenery. Um, but you, Divya, took it to the next level. You decided that you are one of those people who started looking at everything that you were consuming
Right,
as things that were coming packaged. So you found a way to identify how much waste you were creating as an
right,
individual. And everyone, I'm going to blow your mind right now, because Divya leads the kind of lifestyle in which from her home she now generates less than 100 grams of trash in a year, which is unbelievable. How did you manage this, Divya?
and it's really easy. So what started with waste segregation, composting, recycling ended up with the question that why are we generating this much waste in the first place, and how can I reduce it? So one day I got really lazy and I collected too much of my sukha kachra together in bags at home. When I decided to finally go to the dry waste center, I started pulling out these bags of waste and I said, like, how did I accumulate this much in 3 months? And I spread it across my home, and I realized there was waste from my online ordering, from my kitchen, from my bathroom, and then I just categorized it into different areas to understand. Oh, I'm generating so much trash. So great that I'm not sending it to the landfill, but could I really reduce it? So it started from there. I made sure I started carrying my bottle and my reusable bottle and bag everywhere. Started with small steps like that. And then even to go buy my rice and dal, I would just take my own dabbas or cloth bags to the local kirana stores or the shopping mall and just pack it in that. Because it didn't make sense to get plastic bags that took millions of years to make that plastic, and it'll take another hundreds of years for it to degrade, just so that I could use it for 10 minutes from the shopping mall to home. So I started started shopping package free. I stopped ordering online so much because everything came in packaging. So I just went to my local vegetable store, farmer's market, and bought everything package free. Um, so making my kitchen like low waste and minimal plastic packaging was easy. And then I realized I had a lot of body care products, everything that came packed in plastic. So I started looking at small ways to make a change. And then realized there's small steps like just making my own coffee body scrubs. And this is made from used coffee grounds, sugar, and coconut oil, and that's it. A friend also gifted me a handmade, homemade deodorant, and I make my own toothpaste with baking soda, clove oil, peppermint oil, and coconut oil. And it was really easy steps. And I ended up saving so much time and money on what I would shop outside otherwise. So that's how the journey really started. And as I progressed, I kept looking for more and more ways to kind of reduce my trash. So talking about the kitchen, another thing I noticed was we use a lot of synthetic scrubbers at home. So how did I swap it with simple things like biodegradable loofah and these coir brushes, which they last really long, and I could just compost it at home at the end of it. So with every
Have you
passing
switched
month,
to a bamboo toothbrush as well?
Yes, of course. I love my bamboo India bamboo toothbrush, and I tried experimenting with my neem stick as well.
Yeah, going back to basics, like the good old
Yeah,
days. Yeah.
and so much of this is what our older generations practice back at home and in their villages. I know my parents would see a lot of stuff and go like, "Hey, I had this at home before. I can't believe you're going back to basics with this."
Yeah. Tell me, Divya, how do people around you respond to these choices that you're making? Because while you say they're simple and easy, many people choose convenience. And I always say that,
Right,
perhaps the word convenience was the biggest lie. Because all that we consider convenient is actually making life inconvenient, because when
right,
we damage the health of the environment, we're in fact damaging our own health. And the pollution and the damage that we are causing to the environment through the waste that we are generating
right,
is what is what causes most inconvenience. Bad
right.
health is inconvenient. So how have people
Absolutely.
responded to the choices you've made? I remember when I used to walk around with my own traveling bottle or my metal bottle, or I would carry my own mug to a coffee shop and ask them to kind of the refillable mugs that you can get your coffee in. I would get like taunted and laughed at, and people would think I'm completely crazy. Have you had that too?
Yes, back in 2016, 2017, a lot. Like people would think I'm a little nuts. And I know my family would be like, I like what you're doing. I like the intention, but you might be going slightly overboard with it. So I think the initial reactions were like, what is she doing? But I think because so many more people are doing this around, and that conversation around single-use plastics, around trash has become so much more prevalent now, that people look in my perspective, people look at it more like, oh, I could maybe at some point consider doing this as well. And I always felt like, and I tell my team this always, the first person who makes the change will always be looked at like they're crazy. But the second and the third people always help normalize it. So I feel like in the recent years, it's definitely getting more normal. When I walk into cafes and say, hey, can I get a refill in this? They almost understand and go like, yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah. That's amazing. I'm so glad that's happening, because that just means that more and more people are becoming better aware. Have you noticed, though, through this pandemic, through this crisis, there has been a return of single use plastics? While we had managed to, gain so much momentum and awareness through the,
Right,
personal life choices and actions that we were able to make, whether it was by cleaning the beaches or raising more awareness on
right,
what happens with our landfills, just encouraging more people to understand the relationship between our consumption and and the wasteful patterns of lives that we're leading, and what it does to the environment and our health. Um,
right,
the pandemic seems to have caused a setback, because while plastic can be life saving,
right.
and uh, it it is the irresponsible use of it and the mismanagement of it that
Yeah.
has caused the
Yeah.
catastrophic consequences that it is causing. Tell me, how can we encourage more people to continue refusing single-use plastics, and what are the items of single-use plastics that go beyond, the plastic bag or the single-use plastic water bottle and the likes of it?
Right. This is definitely a difficult time to be having a conversation about avoiding single-use plastics because with the concerns around health, everything is coming packed and double packed right now. But it's important to remember that where we can refuse plastics, and this is a great time to self-introspect and see do whatever is easiest for you. Start from wherever it's easiest for you because we're spending so much time at home. What better time to really kickstart that knowledge building about what's happening in our oceans, in our environment, and building that behavior change when we're in the comforts of our home. So while simple things like avoiding using disposable masks unless you're somebody at the front lines of the pandemic, just using reusable masks is such an important step, and discarding those correctly becomes really
Yeah.
important. Um, And carrying our simple small steps like carrying our cloth bags to the market to collect stuff, and avoiding those plastics, those are small steps that everyone can take. And if millions of people in the city start taking those steps now, that helps us avoid that much more plastic. And while it has been a small setback, and hopefully a temporary setback for all the fight against single-use plastic pollution, on the upside, I do see some positive trends because we haven't been able to shop as much, and because we were forced to stick to the basics and what we absolutely need as essentials. I hear from a lot of people who attend our workshops who write to us saying, I never realized how little we actually need and all the superfluous things we've been shopping for. And I feel like that is the core tenet of the whole zero waste and sustainable living lifestyle, about considering what it is that you really need, and asking yourself, like, what are you buying? Where is it coming from? Where is it going to go at its end of its life? So that's one on the flip, on the positive side. And learning how to make a lot of our own things by hand, making banana bread. So many people have started making bioenzyme natural cleaners at home. So this is a simple step that everyone can take at home. So instead of using the harsh chemicals that come packed in plastic, so for example, I make my own natural cleaners. And again, this is made from trash. So these are lemon peels, citrus peels, water, and sugar, which is mixed in a certain ratio. And if you add yeast, it's ready in less than a month. And it's a beautiful process to see how you've made your own natural cleaners. So I feel like because we're not spending too much, we're also looking at being more resourceful with what we have at home. So while we lose some on the single-use plastic front, we do win some, hopefully, on other counts.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that I would reinforce the idea of segregating and composting. There could not
Absolutely.
be a better time for every. Imagine how much waste we would reduce from going to landfills if we could just all start composting our waste at home. It would make such a big
Absolutely.
difference. Divya, you run a sustainability company, a consultancy that helps large events, sports events, music festivals. Do you do weddings?
We did one wedding for one of our team members, and nothing from the wedding went to the landfill. Not a single piece of trash.
Okay. So you basically help all these events become divert their waste from a landfill,
Right.
almost 90% of the waste from a landfill.
Right.
Can you, for those of the people who are joining us who are probably running companies and who do events, could you help us understand how you bring down the level of waste through even at events, because that's one of the places where you see very mindless wasteful consumption happening, whether it is the
Right.
cutlery or it is uh, the water that is packaged, and or
Absolutely.
the material used to you know showcase or highlight the event, so plexes and stuff like that. How do you help people uh, run more sustainable, or organize more sustainable events?
Awesome. So before we even come to the event, we actually sit down with the event organizers and the companies planning the events about 2 to 3 months prior to it. So all the items that you said that really are the main waste generators, like the food courts, whether it's the bars and the beverage stands and the decor, we sit and understand what all materials are they really using in all of these aspects. And then we understand which, like, if there's single use plastics, we quickly identify that and urge the organizers to move to reusable or compostable options. So all the food courts that we work with, we make sure that all the vendors are kind of trained and brought on board. And we make sure that those are single-use plastic-free areas. So all the plates, cutleries that are used will always be reusable or compostable, like areca leaf and sugarcane bagasse items. When we also look at how they're dispensing water, because if thousands of people are coming, you're creating hundreds and thousands of plastic bottle waste. And at events, what happens is a lot of people take a sip and then trash the bottle. So it's not only plastic waste; it's also the water waste. You know what I'm talking about. Wherever possible, with most events now that we work with, we get them to commit that they will remove plastic bottles or minimize it as much as possible, and instead set up water dispensers and urge the attendees to bring their own bottles or reuse the cups that they're using at the bars, the beverage stands, also for the water stations. And then we also understand what kind of materials they're using for the decor. So if we find a lot of flex, a lot of non-recyclable material, and most of the non-recyclable material unfortunately comes from the decor. We work with them to see how that can be, that can be switched with some other alternatives. So a lot of the event organizers we work with have now started adopting like more digital screens, using more bamboo, using reusable cloth that they use over various editions to cut down the trash. So that's the pre-event planning. And to make it easier for event organizers, what we do is we don't just give them recommendations. We also connect them with vendors in the various areas that the event's being conducted and say, reach out to this person. They'll give you everything that you need. So our job is to make it as easy as possible to help with the adoption. And then the event starts, and our team is on ground to make sure we're training all the various stakeholders. So every single in the food court, sometimes there are about 50 to 100 food stalls. We'll meet with each one of them, make sure that they understand and they're keeping up their commitment. Check all their serving wares. Call them out if there's any plastics and get them to replace that. And then we also have a huge team of volunteers, incredible volunteers who come join us on ground. There are trash talk volunteers who are spread across the venue to raise awareness about waste segregation. So they're wearing our green scrap jackets, talking to people about waste segregation. A lot of them adopt or live zero waste lifestyles themselves. So they're answering questions like, why are you making me do this? Anyway, you're going to mix it at the back.
I was going to ask you, how difficult is it for you all to convince people to make a better choice? Especially in a public event.
The first 2 years, I think people were like, what do you want me to do? I'm here to listen to music, like stop bothering me. But now, like, a lot of people are like, can I take a picture with you? Can I pose with you? And we have these fun posters, and they're like, I do this at home. We hear so many more people coming and saying, hey, I got this. I know how to segregate my waste. I do this at home and I compost at home. Or a lot of people come and ask us that, how can I do this at home? And a lot of folks even go back and write back to us saying, hey, I've been meaning to do this for a while, but like I saw you at the event and realized if you can do this with 50,000 people, I can do this at home for sure. And a lot of our volunteers get mobbed and hugged and saying like, thank you for doing this. So I've seen that change happening over the past 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And what we make sure is that the fact that our trash talk volunteers are spread across the venue also gets everybody on their best behavior, that, oh, someone's looking at me while I'm putting my trash. And that quickly becomes a social norm at the event. So that change we've seen. And then all the waste is collected, the segregate waste is collected, and it's brought at the back end. We do something called a decentralized waste management system, which means we want to handle all the waste at the venue, not send it somewhere else to a facility and say, up some hello, this is your headache now. So being a social enterprise, we work with waste workers, NGOs, and their teams are present on ground. They make sure that they check every single bag, make sure this waste is segregated correctly, and then further sort it into maybe 30 different categories sometimes. This could be your paper, plastic, metal, glass, your different food scraps, your plates, etc. And at the end of the event, all of this is kept separate. It's weighed, so we have actual data as to how much waste was generated, and send it to various different facilities, as much as like 5 to 6 different facilities sometimes. And any material like cloth banners or sunboards that might have further use, we make sure we connect with NGOs and send it to them. So a lot of our cloth banners go to NGO goons who use this in their relief and rehabilitation efforts. And our end goal is to make sure that less than 90% or more than 90% of all the waste that's generated has either been reduced from the start with sustainable alternatives, or it's being managed and sent to the correct disposal facilities.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm sure everybody who's watching and all those who interact with you discover you. I mean, leading by example is one thing, but then convincing and influencing change and impacting change in so many more lives is another thing. And you guys, to me, you guys are heroes. I think it's just absolutely wonderful to witness what you're doing. The other thing that you do, Divya, that I think makes a big difference is the workshops
Right.
that you conduct for adults and for children. I'm
Yes,
very curious about your workshops with children because I feel like, it's easier to get through to kids than it is to adults.
absolutely.
When we do sessions with children in school, the one of the ways we get them to see the plastic, I think one that's it's very important to be able to see the waste first. I mean,
Right,
in your situation, I mean, in your experience, you lived close to a landfill that caught fire. It created a motion of events and led to choices that have now, of course, and continue to evolve, and it's amazing. But in my case, I remember being in the pristine natural beauty of the Himalayas and seeing plastic waste
right,
in this beauty. And I then started asking questions and saying, if there are no collection and segregation centers, what is becoming of this waste? And then
right,
you discover that people are burning the waste.
right,
And this set off, many questions. And then I started seeing the waste everywhere, whether it was on roadsides or in our valleys or in the rivers or the oceans, and then suddenly just plastic waste was visible everywhere. And that kind of helped me become more resolute about asking the questions that we need to, because one of the things that I always ask is, why aren't these big multinational companies that package our food and beverage being more responsible? Why are
right.
they, how come it didn't occur to any one of them that everything that they're packaging is going to lead to waste? And why is less than 1% of the packaged bottles, say for example, in the world uh, recycled, while 98%, 99% of it remains unrecycled? I mean, these are questions that, um, make you ask many more questions and wonder why people
Right.
who have the access to the science, the innovation, the technology are not making better choices. But I think it is the individual choices and the individual activism and the change that we're making at an individual level that is making these
Absolutely.
companies question and rethink their packaging, is I think making them more responsible. I'm beginning to see more and more news on how big companies are calling back recycling, and
Right.
also kind of engaging with innovators on how to change the plastics, the packaging that they're using. So that's great
Right.
news. And I think it's only happened because of people. So I think it takes
Absolutely.
for us to see the plastic to start asking the questions. So one of the things we do with children is we make them close their eyes and we ask them, what is the first thing that you use in the morning? And most of them will say a plastic toothbrush. And then we make them count the number of toothbrushes they use in a year. So it usually averages out to about 7, unless of course every time they travel they use a disposable toothbrush, which is unlikely in the case of children. Grown-ups do those
Right.
things. Um, and then we make them calculate how many toothbrushes they would go through in a lifetime.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
And then we make them do the total of the classroom. So how many toothbrushes the entire classroom would have used in their lifetime. And then we
Wow.
make them calculate that with the population of the planet. And by
Wow.
this
That's
time, their mind is blown because they're thinking to themselves, this is just one item of plastic that we are using in our
right.
lifetime that is
Right.
not going to disintegrate or go anywhere for many more lifetimes, because it's going to outlive all of us. And then they go back home and they start seeing the plastic. They see it in everything, and then they
Right.
start making the choices. So I want to know what your workshops with children are like.
So that's workshop with children is something we're just about building right now. But like you said, with adults and children, it's so different. With adults, it's more unlearning and then learning. With children, it's more about like learning all of these things. So we try and make our workshops very immersive and ask a lot of questions to the children. One of the activities we're planning for kids is to get them to sketch out what a mountain, what the Himalayas or what the sea looks like for them, ideally, and then kind of contrast it with pictures of scenes from our beaches in Mumbai and like you said, the scenes from the Himalayas to like really build that contrast. We our questions are more leading and they give us the answers about it and why do you think it is like this, and some of the answers are just stunning about, hey, why haven't you adults like fixed this already, and then very importantly we also get them to take part in the solutions. So what we're building now is, can they start making their own natural cleaners at home? So it's a very immersive experience for them to take their own lemon peels, to take sugar water and say, hey, use this, and they become slowly the change makers at their own homes.
Oh, absolutely. I have my nieces and nephews, and many of the kids we've worked with go back home and train their parents and their families on how to
What
refuse
better
single
way?
use plastics. So suddenly they're not using plastic, those horrible plastic straws anymore, or plastic bottles
Right.
anymore. And they take great pride in it. Divya, it's been so amazing talking to you. More power to you and to all of your team who continue to do such good work. I know that you have, made radical changes in your life, and there's so much to learn from you. I hope you continue making the difference that you are, and I know you will. I just want to thank you for being the wonderful citizen of this planet that you are, and for making the difference that you do. And thank you for inspiring me.
Thank you so much, Thea. And that coming from you means a lot to me and also our entire team. And you've been such an inspiration in just the manner in which you use your powerful voice to represent the planet and to speak against plastic pollution. So thank you for inspiring all of us and millions of others into like stepping up and making action.
Keep going. We're together in this, and I hope that we will celebrate by 2030 a world that is, more fair, more responsible, and more compassionate towards people and the planet.
Absolutely. Cheers to that.
Yes, lots of love.
Thank you so much for having me on today. It was wonderful.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's joined us. It's been such a wonderful conversation. I hope you're just as inspired and motivated about leading a zero waste life, or reducing your consumption of single use plastics, and understanding that the human species is the only species that creates kachra. And by just becoming aware of how much waste we produce and becoming responsible about that waste that we produce, we can make a big difference. So please compost at home, please segregate at home, please refuse single use plastics, because you can make a big difference by doing just this. Lots of love.